Lavengro by George Borrow, Chapter 3, Part 2. I got up and went to the table. The packet was lying where it had been left. I took it up. Had the envelope, which consisted of whitish-brown paper, been secured by a string or a seal, I should not have opened it, as I should have considered such an act almost in the light of a crime. The books, however, had been merely folded up, and I therefore considered that there could be no possible harm in inspecting them, more especially as I had received no injunction to the contrary. Perhaps there was something unsound in this reasoning, something sophistical, but a child is sometimes as ready as a grown-up person in finding excuses for doing that which he is inclined to. But whether the action was right or wrong, and I'm afraid it was not altogether right, I undid the packet. It contained 3 books. 2, from their similarity, seemed to be separate parts of one and the same work. They were handsomely bound, and to them I first turned my attention. I opened them successively and endeavoured to make out their meaning. Their contents, however, as far as I was able to understand them, were by no means interesting. Whoever pleases may read those books for me, and keep them too, into the bargain, I said to myself. I now took up the 3rd book. It did not resemble the others, being longer and considerably thicker. The binding was of dingy calfskin. I opened it, and as I did so, another strange thrill of pleasure shot through my frame. The first object on which my eyes rested was a picture. It was exceedingly well executed. At least the scene which it represented made a vivid impression upon me, which would hardly have been the case had the artist not been faithful to nature. A wild scene it was, a heavy sea and a rocky shore, with mountains in the background, above which the moon was peering. Not far from the shore, upon the water, was a boat with 2 figures in it, one of which stood at the bow, pointing with what I knew to be a gun at a dreadful shape in the water. Fire was flashing from the muzzle of the gun, and the monster appeared to be transfixed. I almost thought I heard its cry. I remained motionless, gazing upon the picture, scarcely daring to draw my breath, lest the new and wondrous world should vanish, of which I had now obtained a glimpse. Who are those people, and what could have brought them into that strange situation, I asked of myself. And now the seed of curiosity, which had so long lain dormant, began to expand, and I vowed to myself to become speedily acquainted with the whole history of the people in the boat. After looking on the picture till every mark and line in it were familiar to me, I turned over various leaves till I came to another engraving, a new source of wonder, a low sandy beach on which the furious sea was breaking into mountain-like billows. Cloud and wrack deformed the firmament, which wore a dull and leaden-like hue. Gulls and other aquatic fowls were toppling upon the blast, or skimming over the tops of the maddening waves. "Mercy upon him, he must be drowned!" I exclaimed, as my eyes fell upon a poor wretch who appeared to be striving to reach the shore. He was upon his legs, but was evidently half smothered with the brine. High above his head curled a horrible billow, as if to engulf him forever. "He must be drowned! He must be drowned!" I almost shrieked, and dropped the book. I soon snatched it up again, and now my eye lighted on a 3rd picture, again ashore. But what a sweet and lovely one, and how I wished to be treading it. There were beautiful shells lying on the smooth white sand. Some were empty, like those I had occasionally seen on marble mantelpieces, but out of others peered the heads and bodies of wondrous crayfish. A wood of thick green trees skirted the beach, and partly shaded it from the rays of the sun, which shone hot above, while blue waves, slightly crested with foam, were gently curling against it. There was a human figure on the beach, wild and uncouth, clad in the skins of animals, with a huge cap on his head, a hatchet at his girdle, and in his hand a gun. His feet and legs were bare. He stood in an attitude of horror and surprise. His body was bent far back, and his eyes, which seemed starting out of his head, were fixed upon a mark on the sand, a large, distinct mark, a human footprint. Reader, is it necessary to name the book which now stood open in my hand, and whose very prints, feeble expounders of its wondrous lines, had produced within me emotions strange and novel? Scarcely, for it was a book which has exerted over the minds of Englishmen an influence certainly greater than any other of modern times, which has been in most people's hands, and with the contents of which even those who cannot read are to a certain extent acquainted. A book from which the most luxuriant and fertile of our modern prose writers have drunk inspiration. A book, moreover, to which, from the hardy deeds which it narrates, and the spirit of strange and romantic enterprise which it tends to awaken, England owes many of her astonishing discoveries both by sea and land, and no inconsiderable part of her naval glory. Hail to thee, spirit of Defoe! What does not my own poor self owe to thee? England has better bards than either Greece or Rome, yet I could spare them easier far than Defoe, unabashed Defoe, as the hunchbacked rhymer styled him. The true chord had now been touched. A raging curiosity with respect to the contents of the volume, whose engravings had fascinated my eye, burned within me, and I never rested until I had fully satisfied it. Weeks succeeded weeks, months followed months, and the wondrous volume was my only study and principal source of amusement. For hours together I would sit poring over a page till I had become acquainted with the import of every line. My progress, slow enough at first, became by degrees more rapid, till at last, under a shoulder of mutton sail, I found myself cantering before a steady breeze over an ocean of enchantment, so well pleased with my voyage that I cared not how long it might be ere it reached its termination. And it was in this manner that I first took the paths of knowledge. End of part 2 of chapter 3. Like and subscribe.